And if it's going to be programmed to be another human existence in the next life, then as part of the suitable conditions the Bada being will need to find is a sperm fertilizing the egg in the womb. And when it finds that suitable condition, then the mind of the Bada being conjoins with that fertilized egg in the womb, and the new life begins. And that's link 4. That's the boat and the people in the boat. It's symbolizing that the point where the mind of the Bada being, which symbolizes is the people in the boat, conjoins with the vessel of the fertilized egg in the womb. So that's name and form coming together. Link 4. Then, of course, the embryo and fetus develops in the womb, starts to develop sense faculties, and so that is the next link here, link 5, called the 6 sense spheres. So this is, again, symbolized here by a house with 5 windows and a door. The 5 windows are the 5 sense faculties, and the door is the mental faculty. So when these faculties become operational in the developing fetus, then those sense faculties contact their respective objects, and that's link number 6 here, is contact, and that is symbolized very graphically here by a couple making love, so a lot of contact happening there. And then, of course, when we contact the object, we experience that object as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So feeling arises. So that is link 7, is feeling, and that's also quite graphically represented here by a person with an arrow stuck in their eye. So there's a lot of feeling going on there. And then, of course, what we saw is, based on feeling, the mental afflictions arise. Pleasant feeling, craving and attachment; unpleasant feeling, aversion, and so forth.
Can you go back, because it was a bit too fast?
Sure. Which one?
Number 5.
Number 5. So number 4 is when the consciousness conjoins fertilized egg in the womb.
Okay.
The new life begins. In fact, in Buddhist cultures, often when a baby is born, they're considered to be 1 year old. The person's 1 year old. I mean, 9 months, but often they say 1 year old, because for them the new life begins at conception. So then, of course, in the womb, the fetus develops, and after I don't know how many weeks, the sense faculties become developed.
Oh, okay.
That's link 6. So link 6 is the point, or link 5, sorry. Link 5, the 6 sense spheres, is the point in the development of the fetus where the sense faculties now are operational. I don't know how many weeks it takes, but... And when the sense faculties become operational, then they contact their object. So that's link 6, is contact. Contact means if the eye starts working, then the eye contacts visual object. That's contact. So when contact happens, when the faculty contacts the object, then arises feeling. So that's link number 7. And then link 8 and 9 is talking about at the time of death. Is that, so feeling here leads to either craving and grasping or aversion, and link 8 is craving, which comes from feeling, of course. But here, this craving is a very particular type of craving. And it's talking about as we're approaching death. That as we're going through the death process, it seems like we're going out of existence. And so then we have craving and grasping to life itself. That's link 8 here. And that's symbolized here by a person drinking alcohol or beer, I think. So they're craving alcohol. And craving leads to grasping. And that's link 9, and that's symbolized by a monkey grabbing fruit in the tree. So the relationship between craving and grasping is first we crave something and then we actively try to get it, is grasping. So link 8 here, we're craving life because it feels like we're going out of existence as we go through the death process, and then we're literally grasping to life. And that grasping to life is what causes one imprint in our mind to become activated. And that imprint is going to determine what the next life is going to look like. Now, what imprint gets activated? Because we got many imprints in our mind. To keep it very simple, what we can say is, if we've led a very good life, not really tried to harm anyone and tried to help others, so then the collective weight of all of our good actions is quite heavy, meaning one of those will ripen and will end up in a good place. Whereas if we've led a very negative life, very harmful life, then the collective weight of the negative imprints is more heavy. One of those will ripen and will end up in not a good place. So that grasping to life in the death process activates that imprint, which is going to determine what the next life is going to look like. That activated imprint is link number 10, sometimes called becoming or existence, and that's symbolized here by a pregnant woman about to give birth. That activated imprint then ripens as the new life. And that is link number 11, which is birth, which here is symbolized by a woman actually giving birth. And then, of course, what follows birth is aging and death, is link number 12. And that is here symbolized by an old person carrying a sack on their back, and in the sack is a corpse. So that's aging and death.
What's a corpse?
Corpse, dead body.
Corpse.
A dead body. So that's aging and death. So what we can see from these 12 links is that aging and death comes from birth, that comes from, and we keep going back to link 1, and we can see that the reason we're stuck in this cycle of birth, aging, death is because of our ignorance, our distorted view of reality. Which means, of course, if we get rid of ignorance, we get rid of these actions, we get rid of the links following, we get rid of birth, aging, death. So if we get rid of ignorance, we can get out of the cycle of birth, aging, death. So that is very, very briefly the 12 links. There's a lot more to be said about those 12 links, but maybe if there's any questions about the diagram now. Yeah.
I want to say, like, you explain it like on the wide angle from birth to death.
Right.
But we can see it as a moment by moment. You know?
Very good.
Because everything is moment by moment.
Exactly.
It's
And in
easy
fact,
for me to look at that because I don't know what will be
in
the next
fact, this presentation of 12 links, there's one philosophical system in Buddhism that says exactly that. They present all these 12 links as happening in every single moment.
Yes.
That is a valid presentation of 12 links. And we can also see that,
We can see that in life.
I mean, in every moment in our life, there's a death and a birth, isn't there?
Yes.
And there is actually, in one of the traditions, philosophical systems in Buddhism, there is a presentation of the 12 links and how they operate in every single moment. Yes, very good. Any other questions about anything in this diagram? Yeah.
What is the symbolism of the tiger?
Good question.
What's the question?
The question is, what's the symbolism of the tiger? Because this wheel or the yama is on the tiger. I think it's like a tiger skin, actually. I've not really received any. I've not seen any teachings about the symbolism of that. But I think I heard somewhere that it's either fearlessness or fear or something like that. But I've not really seen any thing, so I'd just be speculating.
Do the beings in the other realms have mind in the same way that we do?
Yeah. So all beings have mind. In fact, sentient being, the word sentient being in Tibetan is sem chen. Sem Chen literally means having mind. So that's what it means. So all of these have mind, but of course, in terms of cognitive ability, is very, very different. But yes, that's what it means to be a being. You have a mind, and then usually some sort of physical support of a body. Of course, the body here and here and here and here is much more subtle than in the human and animal realm. But there is a physical support for the mind.
How would an animal change his karmic imprint?
Good question. So the question is, how would, if we end up... Oh, just to add a bit and then I'll answer the question. There are a number of different traditions that have some concept of rebirth. And some say that we always are born as humans. Some say that we're always going up, 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 up. But the Buddhist assertion is that where we end up is completely dependent on how we lead our life. So we basically determine where we end up based on our behaviour. So that's the Buddhist assertion. So if we look at this then, and we saw that the human realm, in terms of being able to break free of this cycle, is generally considered the best because we have enough good conditions but enough suffering to know this is not there's something better, and then also enough cognitive ability to do something about it. And to achieve liberation, it's often said that it could take many lives. So then, based on that idea, we'd say, well, okay, then what can I do to sort of make sure that I end up coming back as human? And the answer, of course, is ethics. That if we practice ethics, good ethics, that'll go a long way to ensuring we come back as a human. So that's the first point. Then, if we end up down here, then yes, it is true that for any of these beings here to newly create the causes to go back as a human, very difficult. But of course, even animals, do good things, protecting their young and so forth. So it's not impossible, but very difficult. And so generally it's said that if we end up sort of here, it could take a long, 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 long time before we end up back here. But it's possible, mainly because, if we keep it very simple and we talk about positive actions, negative actions, it's a bit like a balance scale. And sort of where we end up in the next life is generally which one is heavier. And if we end up down here, we got down here because it's sort of tipped that way, maybe as a human or something. But then, of course, remember, every time, and there's quite a lot of suffering down here, every time you have a suffering experience, you burn up one of those negative imprints. So maybe you're not creating too much good, new, but the heavy negative ones are getting burnt up, so they're sort of going like this. So then at some point, if you've burnt enough up, even though you maybe haven't added too much here, it'll still tip, and then one of those, and you're back to human. But that could take a long time. So that's the answer. Yeah.
What is the concept in Buddhism about collective karma? Because when you are born, one of the things is also rare. For all of us here, have a collective karma.
Yeah. I mean, actually, in the actual texts, I've not ever seen the term collective karma, but some of the teachers talk about that. But certainly, part of the imprints, because we're humans, then the actions we do, the imprints will be similar, which means that when they ripen as a similar experience. So, in a way, you could say, actually, we all have our own reality. Because even though we're all in this room and maybe experiencing something fairly similar, we all are experiencing our own world, aren't we? But because of being humans, the experiences are overlapping enough that we can then communicate. That's why other beings who are ripening, maybe here, are not overlapping enough. We can't perceive their reality. So then I think we don't really need to talk about collective karma. But what we can say is that part of our action is also who we did it with and what the environment was and so forth. And it's often said that if we have particularly a strong connection with a place or a family or something, then if the conditions are suitable, we could end up going back to that same place. Like even once, a couple of times in the text, I remember reading, like that the grandfather is born as the grandchild. And there was another case where there was someone who had a strong connection with the family, but they didn't have the right karma to be born as human, so they end up being born as the pet dog of the household. So this is possible. So, and if we have a strong connection with a particular culture or place, then more likely, if the conditions allow, we'll end up being reborn there.
So the imprints that we have as humans, I only refer to humans, the imprints we have in our mind or consciousness, can those be erased?
Erased.
Otherwise we will be like an accumulator of imprints.
Right. So remember we talked about the other day the idea of purification. That's exactly what we're doing. Purification. So therefore, sort of knowing this idea and then seeing maybe we've done a lot of negative things, we go, I'm going to end up down here. I don't want that. But we can purify the mind.
But can you have good imprints as well? And not
Absolutely. Yeah, we got.
So you don't purify them. Do they stay or do they just...
Well, the good ones, that's why we had those two practices, the purification and accumulation. So if we do the purification, the imprints get weaker, and if we do the accumulation where we rejoice, the good imprints get stronger. That's what we want to do. Yeah.
I'm not sure what you referred to, but I'm interested in that question in regard to not like an individual way in life, more in like, let's say, global warming and the situation of climate.
Sure.
Like, just by the way you presented the 6 realms, I could say that we're turning this world into a narc realm.
Probably. Looks like.
Yeah. So how would Buddhism explain that? Like the kind of all of our karmic imprints affecting the world, or?
Well, I don't think we need to be anything. It's just causality. I mean, we do the actions and that's the results we get, no? I mean, I don't think we have to appeal to any sort of mystical thing. I mean, it's just causality, isn't it? I mean, the whole idea of interdependency, but within that interdependency is just causality. So, we're doing all these harmful things and that's the results that we get. I think that's pretty straightforward, no? Or is there something else in the question that I'm missing?
I don't know, like Holocaust, like the Tibetan refugees being thrown away from their place. Like, is there a more global explanation within the Buddhist?
Well, of course, and this comes up with the idea of emptiness, that there's this whole idea of interdependency. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we're sort of like one isolated thing floating in the universe. Mm-hmm. So I think the idea of interdependency can understand that we all are affecting each other and this is part of causality. I think there's not anything more than that.
So I had one of the teachers that I had talked about degenerative states, and I don't know what the source is.
There's it's what's often called the 5 degenerations, and it's basically place, time. I can't remember. Mental afflictions, but basically, the idea being that things are degenerating in terms of more and more mental afflictions, more and more and more, and so forth, and that we are sort of on a downhill slide.
And that, in response, people had the exact same question. The response was that we're currently in a degenerative state.
Right. Well, I mean, we can see that.
But they alluded to that there were other degenerative states referred to in text. Is this like historical degenerative states that were referenced? But I didn't.
I'm not sure. I just know that there's what's called the 5 degenerations, and I can't remember exactly the list of them, but in each one of those areas now we're sort of basically going downhill. But the other thing that they say often in those sort of teachings is there's a sort of silver lining in that if we do virtuous actions in that condition, they're much more powerful than if things are going very well.
Why are they more powerful?
Because it's harder to do them. It's harder to do them.
But how does it affect the global states? Okay, so maybe it affects our states, but...
Right, but we're not some independent entity.
I get that, but still, I find some difficulty here.
Like what? Like,
I'm trying to phrase it.
like, you know, if we do good things, that has an effect on other people as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
So if enough people to do good things, that'll have a pretty global effect, I think. In fact, there's a thing called tipping point. Over the history of humans, there have been periods where some radical shift has happened, like the abolishment of slavery, women's rights, and so forth. And what they've found is that for some major positive transformation to happen in the world, you don't need the majority of people wanting that. You need 10%. 10%. If 10% of people are wanting the shift to a better condition, that has a dramatic effect. It's called tipping point. So now, of course, we're very ethnocentric, and that's destroying the planet. The next level is world-centric. And I read an article by a person, this was already 10 years ago, and he'd done some research, and according to his research, at that time there was about 6 or 7% of people who had world-centric idea. So he was saying we need to nudge that up to 10% quickly before we destroy the planet. But he said if we can get it up to 10%, there can be a dramatic transformation on the whole planet. No? So we don't need, like I said, the majority of people, you know, we just need 10%. And then that can have a huge flow-on effect. Okay, the last question, then we'll finish.
Okay. A clarification on this. Life and death is just, life is just these 3 here on the top left.
Sorry, I didn't catch what life?
Life, from the moment in conception to death, it's just the 3 on the top left.
9 till 12.
Or not, yeah, what is it?
No, all of these, see, these 12 links describe one cycle. But that cycle takes at least 3 lives. Because in a past life, we had ignorance, we did action, and that implanted an imprint. Cycle 1, 2, 3. Then, sometime later, maybe in the same life or another life, we had link 8, 9, and 10 happening. That there was craving, grasping at the end of the life, and that activated the imprint. And then in the following life, we had birth, aging, death, and also name form around to link 7. So 1, 2 and 3 in a past life, and then maybe later in that life or next life or future life, following life, link 8, 9, 10, and then the next life, link 4, 5, 6, 7, 11, 12. We have to, yeah, like I said, this is a very brief presentation. You can add a lot to these 12 links. Okay, let's finish there then, and let's go to the Shavasana meditation.